accept the agenda for meeting of the Board of Health, Monday, August 13th, Selectmen Chamber, Town Hall, 6 p.m. All in favor? Aye. All right, scheduled items. Discuss and vote septic system design hearing, 761 Country Way. Morse Engineering represented homeowner and request for installation of septic tank requiring local upgrades / variances. You wanna step up, state your name?
Are you expecting a full board tonight? Are you
No.
expecting Mr. Clark? No.
No,
Okay.
he's on vacation.
Okay. For the record, Gregory Morse, registered engineer, Morse Engineering. I was before you at your last meeting. This is a septic system upgrade at 761 Country Way. It's a mixed-use building. It has some office retail component on the first floor, and it has two one-bedroom apartments on the second floor. This is the little white building in North Scituate across from Mary Lou's Coffee. We came before you, we're requesting a number of local upgrade approvals and a variance. The Board of Health agent has identified an additional variance that we've added to the plan. What I just passed out is a revised plan that I've highlighted the changes, which are the additional variance request in red. The additional variance request essentially has to do with calculation of the septic flows. Title V lists what the septic flows are for the apartments. It lists it as 110 gallons per day per bedroom. And then Title V also lists the gallonage for retail and office space, 75 gallons per day per bedroom. Title V further specifies, however, that septic systems are to have a minimum design flow of 200 gallons per day if they're an office or a retail area. So we can't accommodate that 200 gallons per day minimum design per Title V, so we're asking for a waiver of that. I did send an email to the DEP asking if you could essentially grant that waiver. I've attached that to the back of these calculations. The response from Brett Rowe of the DEP says that if it's a repair, I imagine the local Board of Health would grant a variance to the minimum requirements. I feel that I've maxed out the septic system at this site size-wise. I feel that you can grant the variance and document that this is the most feasible compliant system. I've prepared water calculations on water records from 2010 all the way up to today, and you'll see that this site historically generates 114 gallons per day of septic flow for the entire building. The system I've designed accommodates 239 gallons per day, which is more than 200% of what this building has used historically for water flow. I can run through the local upgrade approvals again if you need, but they were generally with respect to setbacks from the abutting foundation to the property lines and to our foundation as well.
Now, those numbers that you just said, was that with full capacity, with the apartments being rented and someone down?
That's
Scotty's been out of there for a while, right?
That's why I look back. I didn't do anything from 2016 to 18 because the records clearly show that it didn't use significant water in that period of time. But if you go back to 2010 to 2012, for example, that's when the first floor was occupied. That's when they were using the 114 gallons per day.
So there's two apartments upstairs, each one bedroom.
Correct.
And then downstairs retail, there's two, enough for two or just the one?
Retail's based on total square footage,
Okay.
so we have it as 1,250 square feet.
Now, with the calculations that you did with DEP, was that from the 200 and, was it 420? Or what we gave you for the calculations?
So my email to the DEP outlines, I was telling them that there were two bedrooms at 110, and for simplicity, I said 1,000 square feet of office, but reality it's 1,250. So I mean, he has those design data there in this email that I sent to him. I asked if I was okay designing for my calculated design flow versus the 200 minimum for the office, and his response was, I imagine the local Board of Health would grant a variance to the minimum requirement. Title 5 is the specific section that has to do with that is 15.203, and it's a little vague in one regard. It lists out essentially the different uses that a property can have, and it tells you the unit that you have to determine for the gallonage. For example, a single-family home. Each bedroom is 110 gallons per day. But over here it has another column. It says minimum allowable gallon per day for system design. And so when you look at the commercial office space, it's per 1,000 square feet is 75 gallons per day per 1,000 square feet. But minimum allowable design for system design is 200. I've always interpreted that in the past as the system must be able to accommodate a minimum of 200 gallons per day, which we do. We accommodate 239. But you can also interpret that chart as being each component on the inside. The office space has to be 200 gallons per day, and then you add on the additional. So taking the stricter of those two interpretations is what would necessitate the request for this variance.
Jen, what do you have?
So at full compliance, the septic system would require 420. And based on my conversations with DEP in the past, for mixed-use buildings, the interpretation that I've been given is that you add, bedrooms plus office space or bedrooms plus doctor's office space, and you come up with a total, which in this case would be 420. I totally agree with Greg that he has probably maximized what can be done here. No doubt about it, it's a tight space, hence all the local upgrades, hence all the requests and all the setbacks. But I have two concerns. The first concern is that the email correspondence to DEP on the 9th did not document that you're asking for a 25% size reduction from that already reduced design flow. So you're not asking for a 25% size reduction on 420. You're asking for a 25% size reduction on 314. The second concern I have is section 404 of Title 5. It says when full compliance pursuant to 310 CMR 154041 is not feasible, the approving authority, which in this case is the two of you tonight, may issue a local upgrade approval authorizing upgrade of a system with the goal of maximizing protection of public health, safety, and welfare, which is what I think the intent here for sure is. But the following requirements shall not be varied by the approving authority except as explicitly set forth in 4043B and D. So D says, the soil absorption system shall be designed to provide as much of the required area as possible on the facility served, or if proposed by the owner or operator on an abutting facility pursuant to a valid easement. The approving authority, so that's you two, may reduce the required SAS area by no more than 25%, as provided in 4051. Reductions in the required subsurface disposal area in excess of 25% may only be varied by the department. And it goes on to say a few other things, which I'm happy to pass along. So that to me indicates that because we aren't starting at the 420, we're starting at 314, asking for a 25% size reduction from the 314 they're actually asking for a greater than 25% size reduction, meaning that you, in my interpretation, you don't have the authority to do that. DEP would have the authority to do that. So those are my two concerns, is that we're not starting at the 420, and the DEP would be the only ones authorized to do so, because I don't think Brett was privy to the fact that we were talking about a 25% size reduction as part of that conversation.
Okay. So there's a bunch of things to do that, and I think there's a couple of different avenues we can take here. The sections of the regulations that Jen is citing are section 15.405, which is the local upgrade approval section. I'm not asking for a local upgrade approval with respect to any of the system size requirements. We've eliminated the request for a 25% because we're asking for a variance. We're asking for a variance on the flow.
But it says the following requirements shall not be varied.
Correct. When you're going under the local upgrade approval categories, which we do not need because we're asking for a variance. Now, on the flip side of that, if you say, well, you still need a local upgrade approval for this, and that there states that the DEP is the one to issue the variance in this case, the local board still has to authorize all of the others, and the DEP won't look at this until the local board approves the request. So I'm certainly okay if the local board wants to hopefully move forward with this, hopefully with an approval. We can send it to DEP and have them weigh in on whether the variance is granted or not. That's the way I guess I'd really like to proceed.
I mean,
So-
unfortunately, I wasn't privy to the conversation that was had between the two of you on the 9th. So, when I'm getting the information at 20 of 5 the night of the meeting, that limits the ability to have that conversation and to prepare the board for what the options may be. Like I said before, I feel wholeheartedly that, the intent of this design is to get as compliant as possible and to get this property owner a system that's as good as it can be, short of it being a tight tank. Full agreement there.
Mm-hmm.
I have no concerns personally recommending the setback reductions, assuming that abutters have no concerns, or 1 deep hole allowed. And those are things that are typically allowed in tight situations like Hummerock. I'm not comfortable recommending to you that you grant the 25% size reduction. I think DEP needs to provide input after full discussion and all of the details being provided.
Well, again, the DEP doesn't want to look at the plan until the Board of Health has typically acted on it, especially where they, if you read the local upgrade approval section, which, again, I professionally don't believe it applies in this case. I believe the board can approve the variance without DEP, but I'm willing to go to DEP afterwards and clarify with them, or file with them if that's what's requested, so.
Well, can we make a conditional approval based on DEP's final?
So you would be able to approve, in my opinion, you would, and Greg can obviously certainly agree or disagree, you can approve, or not, the items in black. So on the revised plan that he's provided you, I would feel comfortable when you would be providing approval for each of the items listed in black.
Okay, and DEP would then review the final red item?
So
Potentially. They may kick it back
I-
and say that it
I
isn't
believe,
for them.
I believe, based on my correspondence with DEP, that DEP is telling the local board that they can authorize what's written in red there. So
But-
if you could
But
include,
But there
That's
wasn't a
off of-
conversation about that.
Is that off of the 420 or the 314?
There was no conversation with DEP about a 25% size reduction.
and I've eliminated the request for a 25% size reduction.
I know, but if it
So-
goes back to them
So-
and it's conditional,
Exactly.
they could, because this is thus far has been approved, they then will look at it as a whole,
Correct.
right?
Mhm.
Okay, I hope I'm saying this right. I make a motion to give a conditional approval
For what in particular?
for us to approve everything in black and have the DEP review what Greg just, he said they won't review the whole plan without our approval of this
Of the
part.
local,
Right, our
Of
local
the red.
approval, and let them take it to the next level.
So then, why don't I recommend this and see what you think of it? That you conditionally approve each of the items listed, including the one in red, with the conditions that, one, the Conservation Commission approves the plan, because we haven't received feedback, and two, that Mass DEP approves of the ultimate design flow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's,
So,
So-
okay, so,
So to simplify, because that's now an old list, because I prepared that on Friday for you.
okay,
So my recommendation to you, and if you wanna jot this down as a starting point, that you make a motion to approve, conditionally approve the septic design plan dated, Greg, did you date this today?
yes, I did.
Dated
8/13.
8/13/18, with the condition that the Conservation Commission also, or its agent, approves the plan, and that Mass DEP approves of, and then you can spell out the item in red. That would be my suggestion, so that it moves forward.
Okay, one other quick question. Has the Conservation Board been involved at all up to this point?
No, because there were no wetlands or conservation jurisdiction within 100 feet of this property. It's all upland.
Yeah,
So-
so why would we involve them?
Because the conservation agent reviews all of the plans, as the previous agent has, the current agent does, and we either receive from the agent, note indicating that, okay, or need to file, and then ultimately goes to conservation.
Well, but why would they be involved if there are no wetlands? Or do they approve
If they-
every
they
single
go
septic
through,
Yes,
plan?
yes, they
They go
review
That's
every
the
single.
standard?
So the agent reviews every plan, and any plan that she feels needs to go, in this case, she needs to feel goes to her board. She indicates to the engineer like Greg that they need to file something, and then Greg would present very similarly to the Conservation Commission. So I would anticipate that it would simply be an administrative review,
Yeah,
and that I would get feedback from her.
okay. I'm gonna make a motion to conditionally approve the septic design plan dated 8/13/18 with the condition that the conservation agent / commission approve the plan and the Mass DEP approves item 15.203.
second, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. You want these back?
No, those are for you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, I'll take the paper.
Take it over.
If I'm gonna get it right. There we go.
Okay. Folder 102.
What's that?
And then took folder 102 and,
I know, it's,
Plans.
it's actually a skill over these plans.
Look at that.
That's not totally right.
all right, moving along. Discuss and vote private well, 10 Grasshopper Lane, Caesar, homeowner requesting a variance of town of Scituate private well regulations. How you doing?
Good.
Okay. So, if you could state your name and,
Yes, my name is Mark Caesar. I reside at 10 Grasshopper Lane in Scituate. And I have gotten to a very near the end of receiving a certificate of compliance for my private well, using for irrigation purposes only. I've been working with Jen all along, of course, and to my knowledge, the only thing that I need at this point is the variance for the sodium, my sodium results, the water sampling came back, everything passed except the one item with the sodium, the 20 milligrams. Mine came out at 72 milligrams. So my logic is that, first of all, it's an irrigation well, not to be used for drinking water. And of course, the 20 milligrams, correct me if I'm wrong, but is obviously in there for a very small percentage of the population that has hypertension, essentially, so it's for 1% of the population. So another way of saying it is my drinking water is, my well water, my shallow well, by the way, would be perfectly fine for 99% of the population at 72 milligrams per liter, but it obviously does not meet your strict requirement for all wells, all private wells. The new regulations as of June, this past June, was it 2016? You finished developing those regs.
So the salt, I don't have a diagram of the property. Is there, or maybe I do?
I'm approximately 1,000 feet back from the water.
So is the well, where's the well? Is it near the street?
Near the what, street?
Near the street?
It's, relative to all of the requirements and setbacks, it meets those requirements, so
Can you just point to it?
there it is right
Okay.
there. So Grasshopper
Yeah.
and Damon.
Yep. Oh, okay, so it's probably salt in the road.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of reading and found out, my concern was 72 milligrams of salt. What is that relative to salt water? Salt water is about, correct me if I'm wrong, around 3,500 milligrams per liter if you have pure salt water. That's 35 grams per liter, which mine is only 72 milligrams, which is like very, very minute.
So I have a question for Jen. It's kind of a legal question too, that if it were to be approved, would there, well, I guess it would be on file that you wouldn't be in the deed that it's not potable, but it would be in the file of Board of Health that, you would have to disclose if you ever sold the property that is.
I have no qualms about doing that. If you'd like, I could certainly add that to the deed that shows that the private well on the premises does not meet current water quality standards.
Have you, I know I was here for when we did the private wells, and a lot of the reasons why we went into specific things and numbers was not only to protect the homeowners, but to protect people too.
Sure.
We had an incident in another local town where...
I think I know, I heard that.
Yeah, and it's not that it was drinking water. The kids were running through the sprinkler system and
fecal.
inhaled
Yeah.
and was very sick. So
Right.
that's kind of where, we look at that.
Mhm.
Have you done any homework with like filters or filtrations?
Well,
or?
just to go back a little bit, everything is passed. There's no issues with the water except for the sodium.
Right.
As far as irrigation, to answer your question, no, I wasn't thinking in terms of trying to treat with a chemical to lower the sodium. It seems like a water softener. I think that's kind of where, it's not the case of a drinking water, but how would you lower the 72 to 20? I
Well,
don't
you
know.
would reach out to a water quality specialist.
Right,
I don't
so-
pretend to be a water quality
Okay.
specialist and know
Right.
how to either treat or filter wells.
Right, but to go back to the concern about the public, again, this would not have been even gotten to this level unless it passed many, many hurdles because of your outstanding job to protect the water quality for all the people. This is just a quick diagram. I'm over a mile away from your watershed for your well system, for your water supply system. I don't know if you could expound on anything, Jen, that I'm just sort of at the end of my rope here. This is literally the last hurdle. It's been a long road, obviously, since last fall, and the new regulations are quite, they're developed quite well. I worked my career with enforcing state and municipal and federal regulations with highway and bridge construction in New Hampshire, but I enjoyed, to some degree, working with the professionals on this project, because it was quite challenging, but I met them all, literally, except for if you go through table A and B, there are hundreds of things in the water that have to pass drinking water standards, and I'm here for irrigation.
Right.
On a shallow well that's, we're talking about, not a deep well, we're down about 15 feet. So my pump system would be a surface, to be drawing water up, so it's not to be construed with a deep well that could conceivably be used for 12 months of the year and not freeze.
Right.
So anyway.
But have you done any of that research, like with a water, what would you say it was?
Yeah, so I think what the chair's question is have you reached out to either your driller?
I did reach out to the
or
driller.
to a water quality specialist and say, hey, look, is there the availability and the ability to put an in-well filter? If so, how does that work? Would any of the filters that exist be able to get me to the 20? I think that's your question.
Right, that's what I'm looking at. I mean, I know you've passed all the hurdles, and this is the last one, but it's kind of like.
For irrigation? If it was drinking water,
Well, I'm still going back in the back of my head, is that incident that happened, and that's what that was, irrigation.
but
And
it's,
the kid running through it.
but
And
20,
you know how it was 100 degrees this weekend, a kid sees it in water.
I guess I'm trying to, the comparison between somebody being contaminated, I don't know what that, do you know what that was? That contamination certainly wasn't sodium.
I don't know all the ins and outs, but.
It was E. coli in that other community.
Okay.
Well, just to kind of give you examples of sodium contents. There's so much on the internet. A glass of milk, guess how much a glass of milk, an ordinary glass of milk. We all know that the diets of people primarily is the salt. It's 500 milligrams. I have 72 in my water, so we could drink it relative to a glass of milk. A tomato, basically 2 ounces of ham, 800. So, but I guess there'd be no harm at all to any person in contact with this well. I guess I'm not going where.
So I think where the chairman is coming from is that, the board spent more than 2 years and
Sure.
20 public hearings.
Right.
Developing the private well regulations. And as part of that process, the board at the time really grappled with how are we most protective and how do we treat all of our wells given the input from the folks present at one or more of those meetings. And the board was really struck by some of the information provided from other boards of health and information provided by well drillers who were instrumental in developing part of these regulations. And through those 20 hearings and that information, the board created these well regulations to treat all wells the same, to not make the distinction of use, that all wells need to meet the same setback requirements and all the same water quality requirements regardless of use. So I think that's the history of why there's not that separation of just because it's irrigation, these are the water quality limits, and because it's drinking water, these are the limits. That's the history.
Yeah, and I also think that looking at it too, and I mean, I understand the hurdles you've gone through and, you know, I applaud that, but I'm afraid, my biggest thing that I'm afraid of, if we haven't gone and tried to find something on that, because.
Document it.
Yeah, to document that, hey, this is what we can do, but it's still not gonna help, or whatever, I'm afraid we grant this, so-and-so's gonna come in 2 days later, well, I'm at 92, you gave it to this guy at 70, you
Set a
know,
precedent.
and then next thing you know, these things go by the wayside.
I think that as professionals, you have to recognize the difference between arsenic and E. coli
Mhm.
and sodium. And as a practical, common sense application to your hard work and any good regulations, you have great regulations here.
Mhm.
There's no doubt about it. I think your mission has been, is well accomplished. But I still, I applaud that. I'm not saying no. I can revisit what you're saying. Certainly, I will go back to the well driller, Paul Emmons, to see what systems are available for filtering. And then and then you say another one would be a water quality
Water quality specialist.
specialist, and get back to you with a list of what they recommend for this situation.
If that's
Yeah.
what they'd like to see.
See, I mean, that's what I would say, I mean, we could move it to the next meeting to give you time, or we have to go into September, whatever's,
No,
I don't know how long it's gonna take you, I mean, the next meeting's this 27th of
And
August.
it's probably gonna be at least, I would say, 2 weeks not to rush things, to
Right.
go back correspondence to a couple different people, to get information and put that in something where you can, okay,
Right.
this is what it's.
And I mean, and questions, you can bounce off Jen at any time, or give her
Mhm.
updates of where you stand. I mean, we could go to the September, what's the September one?
Like a month, well, I'm saying minimum 2 weeks, so.
Yeah, this one is the 27th, the next
So-
one. And then the one after that is probably the 13th.
Right. So I take it I'm the first one that,
You are.
lucky me. But
Ten.
you must admit, Jen, I mean, it's like, oh, man, we're there.
I don't
Okay.
see potassium on here.
Well, that's what the, well, that's your reg. That's a
No, I know, I'm just
Oh,
curious.
I'm sorry.
Because that, for our well, is how it's an exchange system, you know, but,
Those results you're looking at.
I just was curious if
Mhm.
it was anywhere, how many times have you tested the water?
Let's see, it's
For the soda?
Twice.
Twice, okay, okay. And both, yeah.
both came
I
back.
did read that earlier, all right.
The first one was 89 and the second one was 72.
This is what so,
But 70, I guess I have to ask the question. Sodium at this level is literally, you can go into all documentation. You are on very safe ground. You can take that
Mhm.
to the highest authority here or beyond, and I can guarantee you that sodium, someday, regulations change.
right.
And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if the EPA is already, historically, they've been wishy-washy on this anyway, because of the 1% of the population, hypertension. There's studies out there now that contradict that.
Right,
So it's just, things change.
right.
I completely hear your aggravation, I would feel the same way.
Okay,
The,
maybe 2 weeks from now you have a little better.
no, I would completely feel the same way. I think what they're saying, and I was not part of this development, was, you know, whenever you say okay to one person, it's a
Oh.
slippery slope
that's-
slide
But
to
you're,
everybody else,
you
and
have-
that's,
you
this
have-
is, you know, it's
I
just
hear what
so
you're saying.
frustrating.
but you're backing up specifically sodium versus something else is, I mean, just because you say yes to something that doesn't give it.
Right. It
Merit
doesn't-
to all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
No, I agree. So would you?
be happy to come back.
September 10th? Is that gives you almost a month?
That's plenty of time. That's more
Okay.
than enough time.
All right, and like I said, if there's questions,
Or,
we could,
you know, it's really up to you. 'Cause
2 weeks out.
They can continue, so August 27th would be the next meeting, same time, same place.
That's
So that
well,
would be
that's,
2 weeks from tonight.
yeah, actually
So it's
2
up to you.
weeks. because I'd really like to, my goal is to try to oversee this fall. That's the goal. I want to try to get my lawn. And we've been doing this since,
September, end of September last year.
anyway. I'm retired, so I have a retired engineer, so I can,
Muddle around for the next 2 weeks?
yes, sir, yeah.
So then we'll just go with the,
2 weeks out.
yeah. So you want to just make that.
Okay. I move to continue the hearing for the requested variance until the meeting scheduled for September 10th of 2018.
August.
Or sorry,
August.
August.
August 27th, yeah, I thought he was gonna go.
Oh, okay.
I only need 2 weeks.
I move to continue the hearing for the requested variance until the meeting scheduled for August 10th, 2018.
27th. Cross that.
I do cross that.
Okay.
August
Want me to say it
27th.
again?
One more time.
You can see why I'm
Okay.
I move to continue the hearing for the requested variance until the meeting scheduled for August 27th, 2018.
Okay.
All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Let's see if he pulls it up.
Oh, yeah.
He's gonna
He
be an
knows how to
expert.
do it.
That's right, he's gonna be an
I folded it, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, well,
Director's report.
Right, short and sweet. We issued 34 food permits, and conducted those inspections for Heritage Days. So it was by far our largest single-day event, in my history, and by far the largest number of permits that we have had for Heritage Days. The inspections went very well. The weather unfortunately didn't cooperate for folks on day one, but the inspection certainly did go very well that day. We currently have 2 open nuisance cases. We had one closed since the last meeting, so a little success there. We're currently working on 20 private well applications. Actually, all of those are revised plans, so they are those that we have, at least spoken about in the past in terms of giving you numbers. We did receive a partial application for a new well today. So once we get a complete package, we'll start reviewing that. Swimming pools, we continue to conduct inspections and follow up on the required bi-monthly laboratory sampling of each, to make sure that the bacterial limits and such are within regulations requirements. We are closing in on the end of beach season. We had one beach close last week. We closed it on Wednesday at Lighthouse. We reopened it on Friday. It is approaching the geobeam limits, so we'll keep a very close eye on it this week to make sure that we don't have geobeam-related closures. As a reminder, we sample every Tuesday. We get the results, as you see, every Wednesday, and then we, close and resample as the results dictate. So hopefully we'll have a good week despite the weather. We'll see. We have 3 active housing cases, which is actually 3 less since the last meeting. Achieved compliance on a few outstanding cases, which is good. We submitted last week, on Wednesday, a grant to Mass Housing to continue providing boarding-related resources to the South Shore community, so Scituate and beyond. We should hear if we have been granted funds for, this will be our 4th year, this might be our 4th or 5th year in a row from Mass Housing. We'll find out probably sometime in September if we've been granted those funds. We continue to track 5 environmental releases. Septic, we're currently working on 1 revised plan received since the 7th, 1 new plan received since the 1st, and we continue to follow up on a whole myriad of certificates of compliance that have various outstanding pieces that we're trying to track down. We have 1 outstanding operations and maintenance repair, which is unchanged. We have 3 outstanding operations and maintenance contracts, which is also unchanged since the last meeting. And we've had 1 failed system brought into compliance since the last meeting. what I have for numbers.
Now with the pools, do they bring them here or do they go online for them? Like if there's a pool, you said that they have to every week or month.
So every other month, the folks who operate the semi-public pools in town need to collect and submit samples to the laboratory for analysis
Mhm.
for a series of things per their permit. And then they can either ask the lab to directly provide us with that report, or the laboratory provides it to them, since that's the client, and then
They bring.
then the permit
Oh, okay.
holder brings them to us. So we've received all of the analyses that we were supposed to receive in July, and we're following up with the folks that are due in August.
All right. Discuss septic betterment program.
Okay, so all of the credit goes to Joan on what's sitting before you today.
Nice
because
job,
I know, very impressive.
She is
I got a
the
couple of
one.
spreadsheets. Can you send them
I
out?
know, I like the flow, these flow charts, that one was nice.
So the flow chart actually is one of my favorites, you know, as we kind of
Yeah.
work through the questions. I really like it, not only because of the content, but also she thought to create colored boxes, which goes to the heart of my love for organization as to who's responsible for what.
Yes.
So she color-coded, you know, who has what responsibility in the process, which I think is going to be really helpful once it's finalized. So if I can just briefly tell you what's in front of you, in very pure, simple first draft. We have a betterment loan application form, which would be completed and submitted by the homeowner. We have a second part of that, which provides answers to questions from the homeowner. So it's really kind of a two-piece part. It's these two. Then she took a crack at providing that blind evaluation criteria for how many points do you get for ranking or prioritizing a system in the process based on your proximity to sensitive receptors or the type of failure that you have. So she took a stab at that. I know we had talked about one of those being if somebody applies during the first wave and gets put on a wait list, do they get any kind of priority? So she worked that in as one of the criteria for you to consider, so that folks don't put themselves out on the line and then, you know, get put on a timeline but then don't get any kind of funding. That flow diagram, forms to be completed by the assessors for owner of record information and the treasurer collector in terms of separate but equal information necessary for owner records. And then she created a checklist, so the draft of a checklist of these are all of the things that afford a complete application package. And then finally, as we talked about the last couple of meetings, it was trying to put all of the questions that you've presented to us and we've had ourselves with reviewing the state guidance documents plus reviewing how other towns implement it. Joan put together essentially a spreadsheet of all of those questions and who might be able to best answer those questions, so that now we'll be able to go to each of those parties and provide a list of questions as opposed to going one at a time to each person with a single question here and there. So all of those items are provided to you for your review and your input. Additions, changes, revisions, exclusions.
That was great. Much more organized. So number 5 on this, the soil evaluation, that's,
Which one?
on the application form, the new soil evaluation, that is for home, let's see, when were the records, if it hasn't been, if there's not one on file, as of what date did they start collecting those? Was it like, 19 something, was it 1995?
So, right, so soil evaluations are per tests, we cannot use prior to 1995 because the determination of
Okay.
groundwater changed at that point, so
Yeah.
yeah. So is there anything historical 1995 to the present?
So I just think we should add that so the homeowner knows
Yep.
right away that they, whether or not they would fall into that.
Yep. John, I made a note on the form so we can look at it.
And that's a statewide. That's not town, that's statewide for the soil evaluation for 95.
So every town can do it differently.
Yeah.
The community posts ours that they have a 3-year limit on their perk tests and soil
Oh, really?
evaluations. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah.
every town does it different. We don't have anything more stringent.
Yeah.
So we fall back to the anything post 1995 that uses models, that obviously would be in the location of the proposed system would be able to be used. And they would, of course, had to have been witnessed, by a Board of Health agent.
Were there systems put in that you know of where they weren't witnessed by the Board of Health agent? Was that a common practice?
Well, the only reason I mention that is because sometimes folks will go out and they will dig test holes, for other reasons. And then the hope is, oh, since we already dug this, maybe we can use it. And unfortunately, without the witness, it
Right.
can't be used, but pretty rare. Most folks have a plan where they know what they wanna use it
Yeah.
for, so. And that's always documented on the form from the engineer. You know, there's always a line that says, you know, performed by, with the soil evaluator's number, because we all have license numbers. And then there's always a line that says witnessed by, and that's a, you know, a Board of Health either agent or representative for. We have a pretty good history as to who the Board of Health agents were.
Alright.
No, I think everything looks good.
Yeah, following the place.
So if you review this, obviously when we give you, you know, quiet time, to review it and have any questions, comments, edits, you know, please shoot us a note, give us a call. But we will plan to reach out to the people that we've identified as hopefully the folks who can answer the questions that we have.
Right.
And we'll create that list and we'll send those along to help further pin down some of these documents and then also work on other pieces of the package that we didn't get to in this batch of files.
Okay. I don't have anything else on that one. Any questions? Do you have any? No?
Not at this time.
Okay. Administrative invoice approvals.
not busy.